Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again. This is Dennis. Today we're going to talk about this camera, the Panasonic Lumix G100D. This is an entry-level mirrorless camera for Micro Four Thirds. This is the D version, which is the updated model that came out last year in 2024, and it has USB-C and an updated electronic viewfinder, but otherwise is quite similar to the original Lumix G100 from 2020. As you can see, it's quite a compact DSLR-style camera that takes interchangeable lenses. I've been shooting with it for the last couple months, and I'm going to tell you what I think about it. Let's start out with some of the specs of the Lumix G100D. It's a compact, interchangeable lens camera. It has a 20 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor, which is the same resolution as many other Micro Four Thirds cameras. It does not have image stabilization built in, nor does it have phase detect autofocus. Instead, this uses Panasonic's DFD, depth from defocus technology, which is fine for stills, but has some limitations for video. It has a fairly high resolution rear screen with 1.8 million dots, and it has a 2.4 million dot OLED EVF. Interestingly, the original G100 had a higher resolution EVF, but it wasn't OLED. People say this one is an upgrade from the older one, not a downgrade, so I have to trust that that's true. I haven't compared them myself. I do find it to be quite a nice EVF. This version of the camera charges over USB-C, which is nice. The camera also shoots 4K video with some limitations, but I'll get into the details of its video performance later on in the video. Panasonic marketed the G100 as a vlogging camera, positioning it against the Sony ZV-1, but I think it's a better fit as a stills camera with video as a secondary use case. Looking at the body of the Lumix G100D, the first thing that strikes me is how similar it looks to the Canon G1X Mark III that I reviewed previously. I feel like the Lumix design is very inspired from that camera, although the G100 is an interchangeable lens camera and the G1X Mark III is a fixed lens camera. However, once you pick it up, it does feel more plasticky and less well built in comparison. That's not to say it feels terrible. It's just clearly not a premium camera in terms of its build and construction. It has what I call a micro DSLR form factor, so it has the viewfinder in the center, just like a traditional DSLR, but it's very compact and squished in size. It has a tiny kit lens that makes it almost point and shoot sized, but of course, being an interchangeable lens camera, you can put any lens on it that you want. In terms of controls, I would say it's a bit lacking. There is a front dial, as well as a dial around the controls on the back, but I would have preferred a second control dial on top like a lot of other cameras have. I also get a lot of accidental presses with the rear buttons when I'm holding the camera too tightly, especially this one on the edge, the white balance button. At least the video record button is large and easy to find, and all of the settings can be adjusted using the touchscreen. The camera has an articulating screen with 1.8 million dots, which is quite a good resolution, especially for the price of the camera. There's also a fairly decent sized viewfinder in the middle. As for ports, it has a dedicated mic jack, which I appreciate, and on the other side it has USB and micro HDMI ports. Since it has USB-C charging, I rarely have a reason to take the battery out of the camera, but the battery is fairly small, which makes sense because it's also a small camera. In terms of stills, I would say the autofocus on this camera is just fine. It uses Panasonic's DFD autofocus, which is generally not considered as good as phase detect, but it's fine for stills. I haven't had any problem with misfocus on the camera, although I haven't used this for any super fast action. I do want to call out a few limitations regarding the shutter. The maximum shutter speed on the mechanical shutter is 1/500th of a second, which is super weak. Beyond that speed, it switches to an electronic shutter automatically, and that's what it'll be doing most of the time. Another limitation of the shutter is the maximum flash sync speed is only 1/50th of a second. So this is not a great camera for flash photography. On the other hand, brand new Panasonic cameras like the Lumix S9 don't have any mechanical shutter and don't even have a hot shoe either. Okay, let's talk a little bit about lenses. Typically, this camera comes with a 12-32 kit lens. This lens is very compact. It collapses down and it's super lightweight. As far as I can tell, image quality on it is fine. And the full frame equivalent focal length is 24 to 60 millimeters. So compared to the Olympus kit lens, it's wider, but not as long. This is probably a nice travel lens, but I have lots of other options available to me. Another good option with this camera is the Lumix 12-35 f2.8. Obviously, this is a bigger lens, and I think it's still a reasonably compact package, and it feels well balanced on the body. This lens should be a lot sharper than the kit lens and will have shallower depth of field and better low light performance. It also has image stabilization, so you don't lose anything except size compared to the kit lens. I've also shot with a few telephoto lenses. This 45-150 telephoto lens is what I used as my second lens when I went out shooting at first and wanted some extra reach. It works fine and gives nice results. I did have an Olympus 40-150, but I got this one instead because it has image stabilization, which you need with the G100. More recently, I picked up this tiny 35-100. So that's a 70-200 full frame equivalent. I haven't had the chance to shoot with it a ton yet, but this zoom lens is literally pocketable. If you combine this with the kit 12-32, you have a super compact 24-200 millimeter equivalent focal length setup. And the last lens that I shot on this camera body quite a bit with was this Legacy 4/3 DSLR lens, the Olympus 14-54 f2.8 to 3.5 Mark II. This is actually the lens I used the most when I wanted to do more serious work. It has a longer focal length than the 12-35, and I appreciate the extra reach on the long end. Unfortunately, the lens is fairly slow to focus since it is a DSLR lens. It also lacks image stabilization, but I was mostly using it for landscape shots in sunny weather. Anyway, those are the lenses I use the most with the camera, but there are tons of different Micro Four Thirds lenses available for the system. Okay, here are some photos I shot with the camera. As you can see, there's plenty of image quality, and 20 megapixels is enough for my needs. I shoot in RAW, and there's a fair amount of detail recoverable in the shadows and the highlights. When I look side by side, I don't see any difference in image quality between this and my EP7, which is also a 20 megapixel camera. Amongst all the small cameras I've tested on this channel, the Lumix G100 is probably the best at video, although it still has a number of limitations that need to be called out. First, if you want to look at some footage, check out my first impressions video of the OM System OM3. I shot all the footage for that video on the G100D, and I think it did a good job. I'll put a link to that video here, As for the video features, the G100D shoots 4K and it supports Vlog, but like Panasonic's other non-flagship cameras, it does not support phase detect autofocus, so you might get a bit of focus pulsing in video. In addition, the 4K video is 8-bit and capped to 10 minutes per clip, which is a pretty stupid limitation, but you can just hit record again immediately and shoot multiple clips in sequence. The built-in microphone on this camera is actually quite good, and the camera also supports a mic jack. I would be reluctant to use this as my main video camera in a studio environment, particularly because of the record limit, but for quick travel videos, I think it works fine. By the way, this section of the video was shot on the G100. Did you notice a difference? So how does the Lumix G100 compare against the very similar looking Canon G1X Mark III? You can see the shape of the bodies is almost identical, but in use they do feel quite different, and they're each good at different things. If I'm really looking for a photography-focused travel camera, I would go for the G1X Mark III. It feels like it has a better built body, and sometimes I prefer the simplicity in the fixed lens that takes away the need for choice and therefore indecision. With the G100, I'm always second guessing whether I have the right lens or not. I find myself reluctant to use the kit 12-32 lens, and I end up swapping it out for a larger lens, which makes the whole setup bigger and heavier. What I can say is it's a much better video camera than the G1X in just about every way. It does have a mic jack and 4K video, which the Canon is missing, and those things make a difference. Another camera you might compare it to is the EP7 from Olympus. And again, which one is the better camera comes down to what you're trying to accomplish. The G100 has a viewfinder. That probably makes it a better camera for telephoto shooting, whereas the EP7 is a better camera for street photography. It doesn't have a viewfinder, but it has IBIS, a better mechanical shutter, better dials, and a tilt screen, which is more discreet for street photography. Once more, I feel the Lumix is the better camera for video. So what's my conclusion on the Lumix G100D? A camera like this is not going to replace my much more professional Olympus OM3 anytime soon. But for the price, it's not a bad camera. And that price is quite affordable. You can find the original G100 for $500 to $600 Canadian with the kit lens, and maybe the G100D model is about $200 more, which you're paying for the USB-C and the newer electronic viewfinder. I think that's still a fairly reasonable value. And if you're just looking to start out in photography, this might be a good choice for you. If you need other features, there are a lot of other Micro Four Thirds cameras available, but this is a fine way to get into the system, and it opens up access to the wide variety of lenses available for Micro Four Thirds. So those were my thoughts on the G100D. Please share your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really makes a difference. Thanks again, and bye.